Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so we are getting back into King Thor. We are covering issue number 3. FYI, guys, we have a little while. I think we have about 3 weeks or a month or so before the final issue comes out at the time we're recording this video. So it's going to be a little bit before we finish this story. Just heads up for those of you guys who are going to be like, where's the next issue at? In like 2 weeks. Yeah, it's like, where's the next one? Because I get that sometimes. I'll cover a story and I'll be like, okay, guys, so we have like a month before the next one comes out. And then like 2 days later, somebody's like, where's the next part? It's like, didn't you listen to the beginning of the video? But here's the thing. So what this does is this basically picks up with what seemed to be the defeat of Loki and Thor. Right now, here's the thing to understand here. Here's why this is all important. When it comes to the All Black, we talked about this kind of timeline, right? That like the All Black basically originated with Null, the symbiote god. But this story takes place in the far distant future. And so presumably we can assume that Null was defeated, right? I mean, the entire basis behind Null is to like destroy all of existence. So the fact that all existence was not destroyed means that Null was basically defeated. But the All Black is still a concept. And because the All Black is still there, those individuals who can tap into it and take the time to harness its power can ultimately utilize the All Black to their own ends. And so we'll talk about why that matters here in a little bit, because in one of the previous videos, we had basically discussed how Gorr the God Butcher, after having been defeated at the end of Thor God of Thunder, the first volume, basically kind of put his essence inside the All Black Necro sword and basically just resided there until such a time when his freedom was basically guaranteed, or at least it was brought about by Loki, who looked to use Gorr to kill Thor, and then in turn have Gorr kill Loki himself. And so with Loki and Thor being defeated, of course, Thor's able to make his way out of this massive sort of coming together of the All Black. Loki's nowhere to be seen, and the indications that Loki's been killed. Now, of course, this coincides with the arrival of the daughters of Thor, right? The granddaughters of Thor himself, and it's kind of a cool thing to see. With Thor's daughters showing up, this is one of the funny things. For the most part, they've just kind of been characters who were out there, right? Characters who were just sort of there, kind of on their own little quest, their own mission of sorts, but Jason Aaron never really seemed to develop them. And I'm kind of curious why, because at the moment, I wouldn't really say they're plot devices so much as like ancillary characters, and I think that like developing them sort of on their own and kind of giving us like stories of the daughters of Thor would be cool. Like it'd be amazing to see that kind of thing go down. But here's the funny scenario is with them facing off against Gorr, in a lot of ways, like they're not on the same level as Thor himself, right? Like they don't really have, like Thor has the Thor force, right? Basically kind of the successor to the Odin force passed down to Thor himself. And that's a huge amount of energy. And so while they are exceedingly powerful, I would say they might be comparable to Thor in the very early days, but they're no match for Gorr. And so all they're really doing is showing up here. And if anything, they're more of a stopgap measure. But what we end up finding out here is they basically brought an army of gods with them, or at least a handful of gods with them. And the reason why is because remember, at the end of Thor God of Thunder, a lot of the gods were basically taken by Gorr and then forced into subservience to build this bomb to kind of allow him to basically send this bomb into the time stream. But at the end of the story, where Gorr was defeated, a lot of those gods really kind of went back and slept. And so what this meant is that where there weren't really any beings to worship them, right? They just kind of succumbed to their slumber, and that was basically it. The daughters of Thor traveling to this distant world, and then in turn basically waking up the gods of old on that particular world, brings them back. Now, these gods, you would kind of look at that on the surface and say, okay, so like this child that kind of existed at the end of Thor God of Thunder, they basically prayed to the gods for the first time in a long time, really kind of kept them coming back and sort of sustained them with power. You would look at these gods who are more or less like gods of like the harvest or gods of meat or different things like that. And you would look at them and kind of be like, consider them nonsensical gods, right? But that's one of the things that Jason Aaron hit on, is that what he really said here is that the gods that exist in the Marvel universe aren't just confined to like gods of war and gods of battle and things like that. That if it's a thing that exists out there, there is a god for it, right? It's like gods of music and gods of dancing and gods of sleep and different things like that, that they all represent different forms. But the idea here is that when you're talking about a being of that kind, they all possess a kind of level of power, right? The power that basically exceeds that of normal people. And so what you have here, and it's really kind of an interesting thing, what you have here are basically like each of these planets' own version of the Council of Godheads. Now, a lot of you guys may have heard of that, but you also may have heard of them referred to as the Sky Fathers. The Sky Fathers are really like Odin, Zeus, different things like that, but the role of the Sky Fathers and their existence in the Marvel universe is usually confined to Earth, right? So it's the various gods that Earthlings have prayed to over the course of humanity's existence. But there is a Council of Godheads for every race that exists out there inside the entirety of the universe, right? Now, some of those Godheads are really, really small. For example, with the Shi'ar, you have Shara and Kithri, and that's basically it, right? But then you have other godly groups out there and so on and so forth, and that's what you're looking at here. You're looking at this huge kind of coming together, this sort of Sky Lords, or at least this Norse version of the Skyfathers, who all have a substantial amount of power, but they're powerful enough to where they can at the very least stand their own against Gorr, and for the most part start to overpower him. And that's kind of the cool thing, because as I was reading through this, I was like, okay, so basically Gorr is being defeated by like all these various gods who have come together in order to defeat him, but it would seem like a pretty anticlimactic end to a story, right? Because, you know, this is really kind of a continuation of Thor, God of Thunder, right? It's kind of picking up, sort of wrapping up all these loose ends. And if Gorr returns and he's channeled the All Black and he's more powerful now than he was in the original Thor, God of Thunder story, then like it would kind of suck if he was defeated by like the daughters of Thor and like 6 gods from some planet somewhere. Like that would kind of blow balls. I'd be like, okay, this sucks. If I'm being honest with you guys, I'd be like, this is the most anticlimactic thing ever. I'd be kind of pissed, but it's really, really cool here, because ultimately Gorr's beheaded, right? His head is chopped off by one of the daughters of Thor, and then in turn it's kind of like, okay, so like that's basically the end of him, and then all hell begins to break loose, because what he starts to do is start to like really sort of bring his form back together, and literally he just says, like, he tells one of the girls, like, into me. All this all black energy starts to coalesce, and it starts to form, and it starts to spread throughout the entirety of the universe. And this is when you learn the full totality of Gorr's power, that the all black is kind of like this almost infinite expanse of energy that exists out there that Null was able to tap into. But with Null having been defeated at some point along the line, and Gorr himself spending all these eons basically learning how to use the all black while he was tied into the Necro sword, or at least while he was confined in there, means he understands the full totality of these things. Because what you end up having is one of the goats of Thor, who of course saves Loki, and then basically kind of being this scenario where like the entirety of the all black starts to coalesce and starts to come together and starts to at least appear to consume everything. Everything really kind of starts to fall apart, starts to sort of become black and turn black, and ultimately that's when you end up having Gorr, who sort of expands out. Thor begins to freak out, and Gorr himself has become the entirety of the universe. Like the entire all black energy that was channeled by Null, the symbiote god, has now spread and immersed throughout the entirety of the universe. It's crazy, because like Gorr himself is now an entire universal force, and that's the question that you have to ask, because where he tells Thor, welcome to the all black Necroverse, the question you have to ask here is, how could Thor possibly defeat a universe? See, this is why characters like Gorr are awesome. This is why characters like Gorr are so interesting here, because what you have is you have a guy with insurmountable power who's basically kind of expanded on those abilities, but Gorr himself is still just a man. That's the nature behind these things, and that's why you see like the daughters of Thor who are conversing here and who are like, what chance do we have to defeat a force like this? This entire universe is infected. Everything's going to end. It's kind of a substantial scenario here, because remember, in the early stories, like in the first or second issue, the daughters of Thor were told, like, this story's not over yet, and it'll reach its finality at some future point in time. And that's what you're seeing here. That's what you're seeing unfold in this situation. So again, it's amazing to kind of see this whole thing go down. But this is something else that I want to talk about here for a second, because this is an important aspect of what Jason Aaron's been doing. For the most part, when it comes to gods like Thor and like Odin that exist in the main Marvel universe, the various beings, because what you see here is this is all, as all this all black is starting to coalesce, right? And like Gorr's becoming like the sun and different things like that. While all that's going down, one of the things that Jason Aaron has really kind of been hinting at here, and you have these people here who are praying to Thor, you know, praying like, save us, save us, save us, that kind of thing, is over the years in Marvel, the gods of the Marvel universe have always kind of stood apart from people, right? Like they exist, but their power doesn't really come from people, right? The power of Odin, the Odin force, does not originate with those who pray to him. The Odin force is the sum total of the life energies of Odin's brothers who died when they first fought against Surtur. That's how you have all that power that Odin possesses. Over the years, like Odin and his guys, like they had ongoing involvements in the lives of mortal men. When you had the Celestials who showed up and said, stop meddling in the affairs of mortal men or we'll destroy you all, that's why the gods stopped involving themselves in the affairs of mortal men. Now, largely we can make the assumption, we can kind of make the jump, that the Celestials kind of made that decree across all different planets, across the entirety of the universe, hence the reason why God stopped interfering in the affairs of men or the various beings that were praying to them, because they were all really kind of the experiments of the Celestials. Now, Jason Aaron's not really confirmed that, but we can kind of do it on our own, and we can just sort of come to a conclusion there. Now, it may be that Jason Aaron offers an explanation that takes the place of that, but in the time being, we can kind of go with that. But the gods themselves were never really powered by beings. But what Jason Aaron really kind of seems to be hitting at here is that in a lot of ways, they are. Right? And a lot of the power of the gods that exist out there outside of like Thor and Odin and the Asgardians are really kind of channeled by the individuals who pray to them. So long as individuals worship these gods will continue to exist. But so long as individuals stop worshiping them, then in turn, the gods will kind of cease to exist. And that's why it is that Gorr is really focusing on the idea of essentially like destroying this universe and then creating a new one that will all have no gods whatsoever. People won't have anybody to pray to. People will just kind of do their own thing. And that's why the motivations and the machinations of Gorr are intriguing, because it's not technically wrong. If people don't look to gods to solve their problems, then people will learn to solve their problems on their own. They'll learn how capable and how powerful they are by doing things on their own. It's not not the worst idea ever. It's actually pretty cool, and it's an interesting idea. I'm curious where you guys stand on that. Like, do you guys think the universe would be better off if there were no gods anybody was praying to? That people should just focus on their own abilities and do things on their own? Or do you think that praying to gods helps people, even if the gods don't really do anything? It's a cool little scenario, but again, the relationship between prayer and gods is a lot more tangible under Jason Aaron's writing of Thor than really at any other time in the history of Marvel. It's a cool element to throw in. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.